As I conclude, let's turn our Bibles to the book of 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 10. I love this passage. It says, as each one, everyone say each one. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. I love that. It is saying each one of us is a recipient of the operation of the grace of God. Each one of us is a recipient of the activity of the power of God. The power of God is at work on the inside of each one of us. Each one of us is a vessel carrying the operation of the supernatural. Peter says, as each one has this working of God on the inside, let everyone use them. It says, minister it to one another. The word minister is the Greek word diakonos, which means to serve with it. The purpose of your gift, the purpose of that power of God, that power of God that is at work within you freely, has been given to you that you may freely share it with others. It says, as each one has received, let him serve. You know, the best companies in the world are those who excel at service. The best restaurants in the world are those that offer exceptional service, both in terms of the product quality and the delivery. You know, when I turned 40 a few years ago, I began to think about my legacy. I don't know what it is, but, you know, once you hit that age, you begin to think, you know, what is my legacy? And everyone thinks about it at some point in their lives. But you know, your legacy is not what you leave behind in terms of buildings. Your legacy is what you share with the world. You know, I can go to a gallery and, you know, go and look at some, you know, wonderful paintings, Renoir, Kandinsky, whatever, or listen to some, you know, lovely jazz or classical music. Or I can, you know, listen to a tape of Brother Hagin or Catherine Coleman, or watch a video. These are all people who identified their grace and let it flow through them to bless the world. The legacy you leave behind is the sharing of the grace that you have been given to the world. That is your legacy. It's how you took the power of God that God invested on the inside of you, how you leveraged it and shared it in the service of humanity. We all know the parable of the talents. The master was going to a far country, and he called 3 of his servants. He gave one 5 talents, one 2 talents, and one 1 talent. The guy with 5 talents, you know, took the 5 talents and traded it. He invested those talents, didn't he? And he made another 5. And the guy with 2 took the 2, invested it, and made another 2. But the one that had 1 just took that 1 and hid it, didn't he? And then when the master came back, and the master was rewarding the others, he called the one with 1 talent and said, you know, what do you do with my talent? And the guy said, you know, master, I was afraid. I took your talent and I hid it. Now, remember what the master called him. He called him a wicked and lazy servant. Now, wicked is a very strong word, isn't it? He said, you're a wicked and lazy servant. Now the servant said, but master, I was afraid. But fear was not a valid, wasn't an accepted excuse, was it, for the master? Now you can understand working for somebody who, you know, likes to reap where he didn't sow. And you're afraid of, you know, messing everything up, so you don't invest it. But the master said, well, that's not acceptable. You should at least have put it in a deposit, and I would have gotten, you know, a little bit more than inflation on it. He called him a wicked and lazy servant. Now, why was this servant wicked? He was wicked because he deprived the world of the grace he had been given to share. The activity of the power of God on the inside of you is not for you. It's for the world. And God does not cast pearls before swine. The husbandman will be first partaker of the fruits. The husbandman waits for the precious fruit of the earth. He can't expect fruit if he hasn't planted any seeds. But the good news is that those seeds are on the inside of us. And God is going to make a demand on those seeds he has planted. Because the activity of God's grace on the inside of you is for the world. And if you don't invest that grace, if you don't share that grace, if the world can benefit from that grace, on the day of judgment he will call us wicked. Because we deprived the world of such precious grace. The next generation is meant to stand on the shoulders of this generation. The next generation should not have to get the same revelation that God has given in my closet. I should document it in books and tapes and on television, so they can take that as seed and they can stand on the shoulders of this generation for the next. Are you with me? Now, if you and I do not, if we don't plant the seeds that God has given us by leveraging and sharing, then we're wicked, because the next generation is deprived of that. The Bible calls this servant lazy because he refused to till his land. Fear was not a tenable excuse. You know, concerning fear, I came across this quote by Marianne Williamson. There's a quote that's credited to, it's actually Marianne Williamson that wrote this. It says, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, to be gorgeous, to be talented, to be fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel secure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. You know, one man of God once said that breakout happens in clusters. You know, when one person breaks out, everyone else now understands that they have permission to break out as well. The world is waiting for you to break out. The world is waiting for you to take that seed of greatness that God has given you and plant it. The world is waiting for you to own your own value and leverage it. The world is waiting for you to share the grace that has already been invested on the inside of you. Fear is not an excuse. We need to find our place of value. We need to own it, and we need to share it with the world. You know, it's not just the grace of talents that we have been given. You know, those of us who have freely received grace should freely share grace. The Bible says in Ephesians 4:32 through to 5:1, we have so freely received forgiveness. We should easily share forgiveness. We have received so much love from God. We should lavish that love on other people. People that have been great recipients of grace should be great distributors of grace. You have received such great gifts on the inside of you. Freely share those gifts for others to be satisfied with it. You know, I don't know if I gave this example when I was last here, but you know, I've got a cousin who lives in Texas. He lives in Plano. I mean, this guy and I, we grew up together. And his family was not as, well-to-do as ours. I mean, my parents weren't wealthy, but, we're comfortable as kids. And he was a cousin of mine, but his family weren't doing as well as ours was. And, he went through his high school, but his family didn't have the funds to send him to university. But what happened was, a friend of his brother came into town. I was living in Nigeria at the time, and a friend of his brother, his elder brother, came into town. He was a wealthy business guy, and he saw this cousin of mine, and he realized how intelligent he was. So he asked his parents' permission if he could, be his mentor. So this guy took my cousin, got him a ticket, sent him to England, and he paid for his university education. He paid for his master's education, and afterwards he just let him go. He didn't ask for anything in return. Sounds like grace, doesn't it? There are no strings attached. Sometimes, you've got to be wary of favors because they come with all these strings attached. He just did all this stuff and let him go. And my cousin, he was based in England at the time. He went on to become very successful. He moved to the US. He works in Dallas right now. He's got his home, he's got a lovely family, etc. But what is interesting about this guy is that whenever I call him, there's always somebody in his home. There's always somebody he's looking after. There's always somebody he's sponsoring through school. There's always somebody, there are a couple of people, who had AIDS, and he was frantically going all over the place trying to purchase, this expensive HIV medicine for them. And they were based in Africa, and he was spending all this money. And I just stepped back a little bit and thought, why is he always doing this? He realized that he was a great recipient of grace. And that grace, I like to use the word, grace can damage your life. It's meant to damage your life in a positive way. Paul said that the love of God constrains me. He said, it's the love of God that compels me. I have been such a recipient of lavish love that I can't help myself. I've got to exercise it. I might look like a fool to you, but it's because of the love I have received from God. Great recipients of grace ought to be great givers of grace. Ladies and gentlemen, you have received much grace. Much grace is at work towards you. Much grace is at work in you. Be givers of much grace.